when the waves crash upon the rocks, it appears that the rocks are winning. When organized water explodes and disintegrates and then scatters in retreat, the rock remains proud and haughty. It does not notice that it has changed ever so slightly. Stranded puddles gather in the hollows of the solid enemy, seeping through secret crevices, or slipping slowly, silently seaward with the smallest speck of sand. Persistence versus resistance. Life is movement. Death is hard and still. The whiff of freedom cannot be crushed by the metal tread of a tank. Love cannot be pummeled by the gavel. Kindness is not weakness. A gentle shower nurtures the seed. A blade of grass can split the pavement. Sunlight gently fades the flags of war, bleaching them white with surrender. Invisible wind will cause a stone face to crumble, making room for a smile and a reason to hope. I know, and I have much experience with how easy it is to be a pessimist. The newspaper will tell you that there are many things wrong with the world: wars, famine, disease, political infighting, environmental degradation, racism, sexism, and bigotry of every variety. The economy is declining while academic debates over what actually is a recession. Even the weather is not a safe topic. Somewhere there is a natural disaster destroying the lives of someone you never heard of. And it's hard to muster compassion for the endless parade of victims that flash across the TV news. And harder still to write for Congress to advocate for change. Because we know that they're out to lunch with some lobbyist who pays their bills. And then there are people. Being a spiritual person, I love humanity. But people drive me crazy. Have you ever noticed how imperfect everyone is? And how everyone dies or leaves? Every single one. Life can be bleak. It's easy to criticize, it's easy to be down, to believe that life is pointless, that all our effort is for naught, and that hard-won battles have been lost. Is there reason to hope? What good is wishing and hoping? Sometimes it can seem like the most silly thing to do. In the movie Life of Brian, the final scene has the title character being crucified, and he sings, "Always look on the bright side of life." Think of the time of your greatest sorrow and your deepest doubts. And words of encouragement can ring hollow. Platitudes can pummel like blunt, dull instruments. Canadian author Carol Shields wrote about her 5-year bout with cancer, which she eventually lost. And she wrote that she grew tired of the people who told her to count her blessing, as if cataloging the good times in her life could ever compensate for losing everything. Yet, Viktor Frankl was in a Nazi concentration camp and observed that those who had hope or meaning in their life were better off than those who sank into despair, whether or not they survived. He wrote that everything can be taken from a man but the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given circumstances, to choose one's own way. There are two kinds of people. Those who recognize the complexity of life, and those who preach, who like to say there are two kinds of things. Being in that latter category, I'm going to talk about two types of hope: wishful thinking and meaningful striving. Wishful thinking arises out of a lack or a need. I wish someone beautiful would fall in love with me. I hope my number comes up in the lottery. I hope the test is easy because I didn't have time to study. I'm late, so I hope that the traffic is clear. I hope they don't cash that check until I can make it to the bank. And sometimes wishful thinking is magical thinking. I wish all weapons would disappear overnight. I wish bigots would disappear. This is the type of hope that Ben Franklin was referring to when he said, "He that lives on hope will die fasting." Wishful thinking is spiritual candy, temporarily satisfying, but ultimately insubstantial. But meaningful striving is a different kind of hope. It inspires action. Thoreau wrote, "If you have built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they belong. Now build the foundations under them." Viktor Frankl saw that the people who reached out to others in the midst of Auschwitz acted as if they had a future, and it made the present more bearable. He was fortunate to survive and made it his purpose to tell his story. What utter foolishness was it to wonder, what will you do after the war when you see your companions killed daily? But hope transcends reason. But it cannot end there to be worthy of the title of hope. In 1970, the UUA at their General Assembly affirmed the rights of homosexuals. It was a small voice, barely heard at the time. It was a small wave that barely made it to shore, let alone even crash upon the rocks. And many of our statements of conscience seem like a wispy mist, so far out of the mainstream that they will never erode injustice. Yet 33 years later, the Supreme Court voted 6-3 to overturn sodomy laws. And even though the current court looks like they might try to reverse that decision, the idea of gay rights, gay marriage is so pervasive that I think there will be a democracy uprising by gays, straights, and allies, and all the letters that are delineated to say no, we're not going back. Hope wins because it gives us a world to strive for. It doesn't cling to some imaginary past out of fear. Thus, ideas have a way of surviving. They killed Jesus. They killed Unitarian Michael Servetus. They burned witches. Gandhi was assassinated. Martin Luther King was shot down. But the hope they carried outlived their shortened lives. Gandhi revealed the true meaning of hope. If we want hope and believe in peace, we will act peacefully. If we hope that the world will be reasonable, we must be rational, while others are irrational. And that's so hard to do because there are so many professional trolls out there who just lob these insults at us and just trying to get a rise of us and to try to get us into a fight instead of marching steadily on to our purpose. Our lives consist of a series of small acts, and we must be aware of the consequences. And the impacts of our actions may be beyond our knowledge. The ripple effect of a small stone we throw in the pond cannot be predicted. Small acts of kindness may transform someone's life. Part of faith, a very nebulous word, is knowing that we cannot control the outcome, but we can control our input. We can live faithfully if our actions are based on hope rather than despair. Goethe wrote, "In all things it is better to hope than to despair." And it seems that despair is always a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you value being right more than happiness, choose a life of despair. If you look for faults in your boss, your co-workers, your customers, other members of this congregation, your partner, your children, or your parents, I guarantee you will find them. And it's easy to blame them as obstacles to your satisfaction. They will fail you, as will the larger society. It does not care about you. Look at all that is wrong in the world and say it's not your fault. You did not make the world. You are not to blame. Blame the world and wallow in your powerlessness. Lobbing satire and derision at everyone, look for what's wrong and despair. Know that everyone and everything is wrong and imperfect, and that you are the only one that is right. Thomas Merton writes, "Despair is the absolute extreme of self-love. It is reached when a person deliberately turns one's back on all help from anyone else in order to taste the rotten luxury of knowing himself to be lost." Despair frees you from responsibility, and some take refuge in that, because responsibility is scary. Despair is selfish. Hope takes us beyond ourselves. Psychiatrist Carl Menninger wrote, Hope is a necessity for a normal life, as a major weapon against the suicide impulse, and hope is not identical with optimism. Optimism is a distant from reality. Like pessimism, it emphasizes the importance of I. Hope is modest, humble, and selfless. It implies progress. It is an adventure, a going forward, a confident search for a rewarding life. To try anyway, even when it seems futile. Anne Frank, the young girl who died in a Nazi death camp, felt compelled to write, and in her writing she displays hope in opposition to all evidence, and this hope sustained her when she wrote, "In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart." Had she despaired, she would not have written a word, and we would have lost a part of human history. And the evidence of her personal death speaks against her hope. But yet her words reach on and inspire good-hearted people to work for human rights. True hope inspires action. Hope is the first action toward more action. There are people who say it's overwhelming. It doesn't matter if you vote. It doesn't matter if you try to change the world because there's so much evil. But I'd rather go down swinging. I'd rather go down doing actions based in their own integrity, not in the immediate result. It is right to be kind, even in the face of anger. To return anger for anger is to lose hope for a kinder world. It is right to speak the truth. For to remain silent in the face of lies is to lose hope that the truth is worth pursuing. It is right to share, even in the midst of poverty. To hoard is to lose hope in future income and the help from others. Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said you should love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward have you? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? If you salute only your brethren, what more are you doing than others?" This is a statement of universalism in action. If you believe something is good or positive, act that way. It's easy to love the lovable. Hope allows us to love the unlovable. Both the good and evil need rain. Both the good and evil need sun. Hope means taking the best action you can, no matter what the weather. Think about hope as an act of resistance, to love and to bear, to hope creates from its wreck the thing it contemplates, writes Shelley. Hope is not starry-eyed dreaming. It is bearing the pain on the way to something greater. It is the purpose that makes pain bearable. Unitarian Universalism is not an easy religion. It appears to be, at first. We welcome people and then say, you can believe what you want. You can be a Christian and be a Unitarian Universalist. You can be an atheist and be a Unitarian Universalist. You can be a Buddhist and be a Unitarian Universalist. You cannot have a clue about what's going on in the world, thus being honest than all the other people, and still be a Unitarian Universalist. We say that you have inherent worth and dignity. And that's our sales pitch. But the hook is that if you believe what you want to, you have to let others believe what you want to. And if you believe in your own worth and dignity, you have to believe in the worth and dignity of others. It hopes for religious tolerance in a world that prefers to condemn the perceived heretics. It hopes for free speech in a world that prefers unanimous agreement. It hopes for sexual freedom in a world that dictates what you can do with your body. It hopes for reason in a world swept away by superstition and conspiracy theories. It hopes for all people instead of dividing the world into winners and losers. We have no doctrine that promises an omnipotent being will make everything all right. We are left to hope and to do the work ourselves. Whatever holy power may exist only becomes real when we act, with no assurance that justice will prevail. Susan B. Anthony was an example of this. Though she died without winning the vote for women, in her last public speech she said, "Failure is impossible." Her hope was not realized in her lifetime, but it gave her life purpose. And think of all the advances that were made in the 20th century of freedom and where they would be without the votes of women. Take your hopes for the world and act on them. It might seem crazy to others, but trust yourself. Your dreams might be far away, but as you take steps towards them, they become real. If and only giving purpose to your life, because hope is its own reward. If we give up on hope, we guarantee that things will not change for the better. So hope and act for the good, even when it seems you are losing. When the waves crash upon the rocks, it appears that the rocks are winning. May we swell with hope and throw ourselves against injustice, doing our part to make it crumble to the sea.